Hey, how's it going? It's Sid, and for my Project 1 experimental, I continued my work in transparency and alpha blending in Unity shader graph. This is what I did last time, and this time I'm trying to find a more specific approach, and the area I chose was in GUI, the you know canvas interface. It turns out that Unity 6 has a built-in shader for the canvas, which solves a lot of problems that existed before when there wasn't one. There were a lot of parts that ended up happening in this project, and they got me caught up. So I'll introduce them here and then go talk about them in editor. First, I made a manager for the new input system that works with both mice and gamepads and gives them a cursor. Here are those two manager scripts. The first one is the cursor manager. This essentially takes the list of player inputs from the game input manager and uses some low-level input framework along with Unity's high-level input system that they introduced, and it manages the bounding of the cursors, padding, and all of that. One issue that I ran into really early on that sent me back was a confine mode error. It turns out Unity's confine mode doesn't work on Mac, but it works on Windows, which was giving me a lot of issues, and I just really wanted to get it figured out. So I ended up coming to a solution, and it chewed away from a lot of the graph side of the project, but I did want to show it off. There is a nice system here in place if you want to check it out in the group repo to handle as many players as you'd like, but here I have four with different inputs working in tandem. After that, I moved on to making some of the shaders. The first thing that I learned early on was how all of this blending works behind the scenes, and it definitely confused me a little bit. The video wasn't super clear, so I don't think I can do a perfect job explaining this system. So if I get anything wrong, also feel free to correct me. But how I understand it is that there are sources and destinations, and sources are drawn over destinations. In the center here, you are seeing different ways in which the destinations can be multiplied together depending on what the alpha value is of the image. On the left is how the base image is drawn. And then on the bottom, this is how they can be added together to get you some interesting effects with transparency. To then utilize the knowledge of how blending works, I made two shaders. The first is extremely simple, almost painstakingly so. It's just a texture that we are sampling, and then an emission color. And then there's a second one for actual sheen on buttons that's a little bit more complex. Essentially, it is taking a gradient, rotating it, and doing some other things like saturations and getting a wave generated from the gradient. And it is timing out said wave, offsetting it. This is to ensure that the wave doesn't start in the middle or start on the edge and then never actually traverse the center of the image. And then on the right here, we added an emissive property to add that sheen to the wave. If a bool is set in the properties window of the material, it will go ahead and add a color to the wave and then plug it into the emission. And then right down here is just the base texture. After the basic graphs were made, I went ahead and viewed the generated shader code from them, and I made some variants. So I just renamed them, and then right down here on line 44, this is kind of where the bread and butter was from this whole project. This is the blend mode for the shader, and this, this one and one minus source alpha, this is like, these are two keywords for how it is blended, and you can mix and match a lot of those keywords for different effects. After making said variants on the left here, there was one more final step. So when you view the generated code of the shader, all the way at the bottom, there is a pointer to the pass that we're using for this, for how this material renders, I believe. And you can change this pointer and get different effects. So following that pointer, we got this canvas pass right here. I went ahead and went to the bottom and commented out the alpha multiplication on the RGB here, saved it, and then pointed another one of these custom shaders towards the custom pass that you see right here. After all is said and done, you now have 4 different blending methods for an icon, essentially. You'll see that some, although supposedly blending, are already showing the image below right away. That's the additive. And as we bring down the alpha value, you'll see more come into frame here. You may notice that the one on the left look extra bright, and that is because that is set up to handle HDR coloring, aka emission, and that means we get a nice bloom effect on the material when it's at real high values. In this next scene, I'm not utilizing any of the blending, but instead showing off the shiny shader. On the left, it's not using any emission. On the wave and the right is. Similar effects here. You get a nice kind of bloom around the object on the right. Both have that kind of passing wave, and as you fade them out, they'll get less intense. And with all said and done, showing them all on the same screen here, this is the variety of effects that you can get using all these settings on these variant shaders, essentially. While I wasn't able to get any further specific, really, implementation of anything, I think this does do a pretty good job of just showing off a lot of different directions you could go with designing your UI, and with things in mind such as other icons or objects that are going to be behind it and seen, you'll get a great idea of how it's going to behave. And then last but not least, here is how it looks on something a little bit more applicable, like an actual UI icon. In this instance, it's a card here. I was trying to do some work with kind of essentially pressuring these edges of the card, kind of like you'd see in a game like Blatro, where if I was hovering the cursor over, the card would dynamically kind of bounce based on where the cursor was pressing on it. Wasn't able to get that in, but this is what everything could look like on something more proper image. All right, any questions?